Hello everyone, welcome to a short video on how to conduct a literature search. So first of all, we need to know what is a literature search. Well, a literature search is when you are looking for literature to support you in writing your essays and reports. So it can be collecting data, it can be collecting written materials, it might be looking at primary sources, but it's looking for written information from academic sources that will support you in your work. It's secondary research. So primary research is when one might do surveys, it might be when one does experiments, that kind of hands-on primary research. Secondary research is when we are reading other people's research. It's used, as we said, to write essays, to inform reports, and to create literature reviews. So what are you looking for? Well, when you're doing a literature search, you want to try and get a greater understanding of the subject, make sure that you fully understand the area that you're looking at. You're trying to gather a view of the main schools of thought on the topic, the main theories. What are the main things that need to be covered in that area? You're looking for critical discussions of these main theories. So you don't just want to read descriptions of the main theories. You want to find things which actually analyse them, which look at the strengths and the weaknesses, where the problems are, what needs to be said about them. You're also looking for current research trends in the field. Now, of course, this is philosophy. A lot of your resources are going to be older, but it's still a good idea to make sure that you're looking at what's being said about the topic right now. What new ideas are there? What new discussions are there? So we want to look at current research that's going on. And it may be useful to look for case studies or examples. We know that when you're writing an essay, using examples can be really helpful for showing that you have an understanding of the topic. So when you are doing a literature review, it's helpful to bear in mind that you're going to need examples and to be looking for these as you go along. So this is a quick overview then of the secondary research process. We start by doing background reading, making sure that you have a general understanding of the topic. Then you move on to identifying your search terms. After that, you're going to identify relevant journals and tools, so that includes your databases. Then you start collecting your materials, then you assess your materials, and then you can use your materials to collect your notes and data and to get further ideas for research from that. So we're going to look at each of these stages individually and go through them quickly. So we're going to start with background reading. Whenever you start researching a topic, you need to make sure that you have a general understanding of the topic before you go any further. Reading the journals at this stage isn't going to be terribly helpful because it might well just confuse you. You want to make sure that you've got a good basis to jump off from. So you need to start with what you already know about the topic. Do you understand the topic? And at this stage, it's a good idea to look at textbooks, glossaries, and subject dictionaries to help you get a general idea of the topic. This will also help you pick up what the main theories are on the area, and also to get a feel for who the main writers are, who you should be looking at. It can be also useful at this stage, depending on your topic, to consider whether it's been in the news lately, if it's something that's under current discussion. It's unlikely to be an issue for Nietzsche, but it's useful to bear in mind for other topics. Once you've done your background reading, you can start to look at identifying search terms. Now for this, you need to use your research question, whether that's your essay title, report title, and your background reading. It's very important to make sure that your essay stays relevant to the question that you are asking. So you need to really focus on what exactly it is that you need to know. From your background reading, you can tie this into what theories or people are relevant. You want to think about what current research you heard of that could be useful. And to start thinking about your essay structure here. What information are you going to need in order to answer your question? Where are you going to need examples? Where might you need a case study? Now, in terms of identifying your search words or search terms, these are the words which are going to go into your search bar in your database or in your library search. So the kind of words you want to look for are the words that you're putting in. You're looking for words that have come up a lot in your reading. And you want to think about as well alternative words that might mean the same thing. Now, I want us to look at a possible example here. Let's imagine that we are writing an essay that looks at the view that Nietzsche has of Christianity in the Antichrist. And let's imagine that we're trying to work out some search terms in relation to that. Well, the kind of terms that we might want to use, we're going to want to use the word Antichrist, because of course we're looking for that book title. But we also might want to look at the different ways that it might appear in search terms. Some might have used a dash in between anti and Christ, and some might not have. Of course, we're also going to need to use Nietzsche's name. That might be something to put in to make sure to try and narrow it down. Now we can search for these either individually. We can search individually for Antichrist. We can search individually for things on Nietzsche, or we can put in Nietzsche and Antichrist and see what happens. We might also want to put in Nietzsche and Christianity or Antichrist and Christianity. We also might want to try Christ. We know that Nietzsche talks about a possible separation of Christ and Christianity, so that's something that we could look for. We might want to put in Christian, Paul. These are words we might want to use to try and get a general overview of his views on Christianity in the Antichrist. Now, we've got up here as well now the term priests. Now, in the Antichrist, we might want to tie in his views there on Christianity to what he also says about priests. If you chose to do this, if you wanted to narrow your question a little bit more, then this is something that you could also look for. But you would probably want to tie in a secondary term like this to your other words. So you might want to look at Nietzsche, Antichrist and priests, or Nietzsche, Christianity and priests, to try and make sure that you're not just looking for general papers that mention Nietzsche and priests, but ones that are actually going to be relevant to that particular part of the Antichrist that you want to look at. So again, nobles might be a term that you could use in a secondary way. So you might want to look at Nietzsche's ideas of priests and nobles, but to make sure that you're also searching for Antichrist at the same time, so that you're tying it in to how it's relevant to the Antichrist, rather than then being pulled in a different direction of looking at Nietzsche's work on priests and nobles. Now, once we've identified our search terms, we want to think about the relevant tools and journals that we can use. It's helpful to have an idea of what some of the main journals in the field are. Now, if you go to the library website and you look under the section which talks about religion and philosophy, you will actually see that it does list some of the journals. So you can go directly to journals that you think would be relevant. You can also use the general library search bar, is actually very good, and you can use that to look for materials. But I also find it very useful to use the particular databases that the library recommends for the subject. There is a list on there that you can use with the links, and you can experiment really with putting different combinations of those search terms in to the database bars and see what you come up with. They will of course give you the abstracts, and if you use the library databases rather than the general search engines like Google Scholar, it does mean that you're getting straight to the journals that you can actually access. I do like Google Scholar, I think it's very useful, but you do have the disadvantage that it doesn't necessarily give you the journals that you can actually access, whereas if you use the ones from the library, it does save you that bit of time. You're now ready to start collecting your materials together. So obviously we've started with your textbooks for that general reading around the subject. After that, you've hopefully managed to gather some specialist subject books from your searches, and you would also hope to have a few journals, some perhaps collections of papers, or maybe even some conference proceedings that you can use. Textbooks just by themselves are too general. They're not enough to get the higher grades. One of the reasons for this is that they are not critical. Textbooks are designed to give a general overview of a subject and to really be quite impartial. A specialist subject book or a journal paper give a more detailed view of the subject, but they also are more critical, and they are more likely to give you an up-to-date interpretation of what's going on in the field. Particularly the journal papers will enable you to mention the more recent debates that are going on in that topic. Now, it's also important to be able to assess materials, and I've talked to you before about the difference between academic resources and credible resources. So what we're looking for with a really good academic piece of research, we're looking to see firstly if it's peer reviewed. So that's whether it's been read by other experts in the field. It's helpful to know what year it's written in. Now, this is philosophy, so older materials are not necessarily a problem, of course. We're certainly not going to complain that you're reading Nietzsche, who was a long time ago, but we should try and balance that with newer pieces so that you show an awareness of what's going on in the academic field. It's helpful to make sure that you're reading your abstract. Make sure that you're finding research which is relevant to your question. It's very easy to gather together something which is generally to do with Nietzsche and see those key words and just grab them. But you've got to make sure that it's going to help you answer the question that you are set, because that's the key thing you've got to do. It's also helpful to look at the bibliography. Is it respectable? Does it have a bibliography to start with, of course? And does it look like they've looked at a wide range of resources? Finally then, you're ready to do further research. Now, looking at bibliographies and citations in the existing pieces you've got can be really useful. If a paper is talked about a lot, or if an author is listed as being important or pops up a lot in your research, that might be someone to follow up, something to look for. So you're looking for anything which is a commonly used resource or paper. And if there's a section in one of those articles that you've read that's particularly useful, what does it reference? So finally then, what you're ready to do is to collect your notes on each piece. As you go, it's really useful to record the references. It's far easier to have your references with your notes so you know which citation should go with each idea rather than trying to match it all up at the end. Don't forget to include your page numbers for your quotes as you go, because again, that's a real time saver. It's terribly frustrating to get to the end and realise you've got to try and trace down the page number of a quote. Try and link your notes to your essay plan. That means that you can see where there are any gaps in your research and you can make sure you come back and fill those in. Remember, having good research and good research notes is a really good basis for getting those higher grades, because it will show an understanding of your topic and it will show an ability to research.